Hey, movie lovers, welcome back for another Anatomy of Movie here at Popcorn Talk. Today we talk about The Possession of Hannah Grace, the first leading role in a film for Shay Mitchell. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk, we talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. And in case in the intro I said we, what I really mean to say is me. I am the only one here out of my Anatomy of Panel crew, out of Marissa Serafini and Demetri Panos, that I've seen The Possession of Hannah Grace. And so I will do a kind of a quick review, not our normal dissection. For those of you joining us for the very first time, what we normally do is give a review and our opinions and go in depth about the various storylines and so forth, and talk about the making of a particular movie, culminating into the box office and all that. So lots and lots of stuff to look forward to. However, I will try to get as much of that as I can, but this is going to be a much more compact version of it. It's more or less just kind of my thoughts on the movie, my questions about the movie, and recommendation of who this movie makes sense for. So I'll try to keep the non-spoiler stuff at the top and then get into I will call a spoiler warning later in the episode and let you know if you're not interested in spoilers. That way you can tune out and check it back in later once you've seen the actual movie. So, overall impressions is where we normally begin, and so that's where I will begin right now. I was excited. I've, as of this year, really have gotten more and more into horror. I appreciate the genre more so than I ever used to, and I was excited for this movie. A possession movie is kind of like the basis of horror, and the fact that this storyline based on trailers takes place in a morgue, where a morgue to begin with is already a very grim and kind of odd place, and you have someone like Shay Mitchell working down there and kind of being isolated. I was excited, I was really looking forward to this and what it could bring. I thought it would be on par to a lesser extent, where it's both comedic and not taking itself too seriously, but all at the same time still a good movie. Maybe something along the lines of Hellfest. And when I went into it, overall, it was similar to that. What I was most surprised by, this next 20 seconds may constitute a spoiler to some, so if you're interested in not knowing that, tune out. It takes place over the course of a very short period of time, only a few days, where I thought it would take place over longer. I thought she, in essence, would be continuing to lose her mind over a period of time and then being questioned by those around her. But that's not the case. It really, for most part of it, it takes place over one night, and that's where a lot of the stuff is happening, which is interesting because the trailer didn't lead me to believe that. But in essence, I actually applaud it that it is so self-contained to that moment. And I thought the cast that plays each of these roles is quite fantastic. There's a character that gets Megan Reed as Shay Mitchell's character, that gets Megan Reed a job at this at the morgue because she needs it, and I appreciate that. There's a whole relationship with a boyfriend that's kind of there and in the background and kind of emerges as time goes on. So there's a great cast of characters that I appreciated, and each of them is at some points helping Megan Reed, and at other times, invalidating what she may have seen. Based on the trailers, it's no surprise that Megan Reed's going to have these visions of the supernatural, which are being caused by the possessed Hannah Grace, who ends up in the morgue of where Megan Reed is working. And so, from that perspective, what I appreciate in this movie, and whenever a movie can pull it off, is, what's the line for insanity in essence? And from that perspective, when you look at it, is what's happening actually logical and based on something versus illogical and something being made up? And what I appreciated about this movie is that it balances that line fairly well. Megan Reed's character, from a very early on in the movie, you learn that she suffered a trauma at her previous job, which she was a police officer, and because of that has taken to drug use to help numb the pain and so forth. And so by that in and of itself, it puts her out not in the right state of mind. And she's kind of grappling with that, and there's always that question of what's real and what's not. And even from her perspective, because, sometimes as you watch these horror movies, you see it from the main character's point of view, and it's very easy to justify, oh, well, everyone else is just making her out to be crazy. The fact that she herself doesn't know if this is real or not at certain points adds layers to it. And in essence, perhaps this is the wrong term, but Hannah Grace becomes this larger-than-life character. There's really... the opening scene introduces us to Hannah Grace and the depth that her father is willing to kind of succumb to and say, hey, this is no longer my daughter, the Hannah Grace that I knew. This is pure evil. And they try to destroy it, but what we learn later on in the movie is that obviously there's only one particular way to destroy her, which I won't give away quite yet. And that becomes the crux of the movie. No matter what he's tried before that, it just hasn't worked. And so, now, I guess, in essence, I'm going to get more into spoilers. So this is, I guess, as an official warning of a spoiler as you're going to get. In essence, this body, he was trying to chop up the body and essentially disintegrate it, but he couldn't, meaning the father. And so he brings it to the morgue, or it gets brought to the morgue, and then his mission is to really destroy it. So I appreciate the elements where all of these things tie together in the sense that early on, as Megan Reed is getting the tour of the morgue, it's told that she's not allowed to go beyond a certain point, and it's that one time that she does that all of a sudden things go right. Now, obviously, in a large part, they were going to go right anyway because Hannah Grace was already at the morgue. The person that made it in is, of course, the father. But I like that dichotomy because at first you don't know that it is the father, and so in essence, who's really putting her at danger, because now she's got, in essence, both to contend with. And then as the movie goes on, what she does is she realizes that the father was always right. Now, cutting more towards the end, one of the things I thought, the whole struggle was to get her into a furnace. To destroy Hannah Grace this way was the only way. And what's kind of plaguing me is that it seemed almost too easy. Whereas, how many times between the father and Megan Reed have they tried to get this body into the furnace, and that did not work. Then towards the end, she's able to pull it off. Now, I think part of that theory is because the demon, if you will, understands that this is going to happen, and the only way out of this is not to fight it, but in essence latch onto another host. That host being Megan Reed, and that's what the movie sort of ends on. Which, if I'm being honest, the ending is the thing that I felt most disappointed by. I thought it was a fairly enjoyable movie up until that point. I thought it had decent jump scares. I was invested into the story, into the relationships. I just think it's a very typical ending where here we're going to continue and give a cliffhanger by, the one person that was fighting this entire entity is now going to be the new possessed. And so from that perspective, I was a little bit let down, primarily because you're always rooting for the main character. Generally in a horror movie, you don't want these troubles on them and have to deal with them. And especially they portrayed Megan's character out to be someone who was struggling with a lot, and towards the end, she did admit her faults. She was, and as she says to her boyfriend, Andrew, she lets him know that she was stealing his pills, but she didn't take them, and she no longer wants that temptation, and she wants to just, in essence, be authentic, which she hasn't been. She's been hiding her emotions because of what happened in the past, and it's understandable, but the only way to combat that is, of course, to really admit it and then be able to find mechanisms to deal with it and techniques. And that's what she was doing. And so to have her be possessed by the end of the movie is a little bit of a letdown, because she doesn't walk away unscathed. In fact, she walks away quite the opposite. And she suffers in essence a second trauma, and except that comparatively speaking, this one ends up being a lot worse. So she's already had a lot to deal with, and I don't know, maybe I just want a happy ending for my various movies, but that's kind of what I was hoping for. Now, as far as everything, what I appreciated by isolating the morgue and just the way it was set up, where some of the lights don't stay on the entire time. You have to they're motion censored. I appreciate that aspect of it, because it felt motivated, and it gave it that scare, that chill factor of what's lurking in the shadows. And as we discover, Hannah's killing of the other humans, she's slowly regaining her powers, but then she quickly needs to rest. So there was a logic behind it that started to make sense as time went on, and I appreciated about that. It wasn't just things happening for the sake of them happening, which sometimes in bad horror can happen. That wasn't the case here. So all in all, if you like horror, and it's a very fast watch too, which I appreciated. It just got in and out. It set things up that it needed to. It didn't linger on any of the things that more than it should have. So I respected that about it. One of the interesting parts is this was shot in summer of 2016. So it's been a while in the making for this movie to really come out. It was shot in Boston, Massachusetts, which I appreciated. It was fun to see Boston from that perspective. But yeah, it's been a long time coming for this movie, and the budget was, they say on the higher scale, about $9.5 million so far, and has grossed about $11.2 million. I believe it will make its money back. I think this is more of a movie that will do better in ancillary markets, and as time goes by, through licensing deals and so forth, whatever the case may be. Because it's certainly, the fact that it has 12% on Rotten Tomatoes is not giving it a fair shot, obviously. Now, the interesting part, it does only have a C- on Cinema Score, so word of mouth is really not that good. But I do think if you do like horror and you just kind of want to have a fun time, there's something to be had with this movie. I think if the ending was slightly improved, it could be a lot better, but I'm glad to see Shay Mitchell embracing this lead role for herself. I am impressed by the level of preparation she brought for this movie. She did study addiction. She studied she did some ride-alongs in terms of police work, because her character was a police officer. And then she also studied and shadowed the morgue and whatnot. And so I appreciate her willingness to tackle this role and to make it as honest as she can. There's a lot of interviews out there about her talking, being the number one on the cast list. And in particular, it's one thing to be the main actor in an ensemble piece, or even a movie that has a lot more characters. Or basically, where I'm going with it is that she, in essence, she has the most screen time by far. So it's not that she's even just number one on the call sheet. She is quite literally carrying this movie for large chunks of time, not interacting with anyone or anything. And so kudos to her for tackling that. It'll be interesting to see where her career goes from here in terms of acting. But I think it's a good calling card for her. Certainly, a lot of actresses have gotten their start in horror. Jamie Lee Curtis being a very prime example through the Halloween series. And yeah, that in essence is my thoughts on The Possession of Hannah Grace. I'd be very curious to know about your thoughts on the movie. So by all means, comment below. Let me more specifically know what you're thinking. And that's about it. In the meantime, if you want to interact more directly, I'm at Phil Svitek. And of course, check out our plethora of other movies that we've covered here on Anatomy of a Movie. And in general, we have tons of shows here at the Popcorn Talk Network, so check those out too. They're really, really wonderful. Demetri also does Meet the Movie Press. So lots and lots of stuff for you to check out. Hopefully this has been enjoyable. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time on a more in-depth, fuller panel dissection of Anatomy of a Movie. Bye.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of its owners or principals.